Okay, it's story time. This is for lack of a better term, download or vision that I received. And I was praying earlier and talking to the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. And I was reflecting on some things that happened yesterday. Anyway, in my stillness, this scenario came to me. It's actually two scenarios involving the same people. So we'll do part one. A man and a woman from two different backgrounds and cultures come together, and they're contemplating getting married. And so they have dinner with the opposite families. And in one scenario, one side of the family prepares the dinner, and in one scenario, the other side of the family prepares the dinner. And two different things happen. So I'm going to get to the story of what was taking place. I'm not a big meat eater, so I don't know what kind of cut of meat this was, but it was a large meat, kind of like what's the word for it? I don't want to say pot roast, but brisket or something of that nature. And in both cases, in both scenarios, the same meal was being prepared, just differently by the different sides. Now, the first scenario that I saw was the female in this relationship prepared the meal the way traditionally her family prepares it. And in doing so, it had been passed down from her mother by her grandmother to cut off the end of this particular piece of meat and put it in the pot and then do all the seasonings, etc., to cook it. And a large chunk of the end piece was always cut off and fed to the dogs. And their family never ate it. They only ate the leaner portions of the meat, where the part that was cut off was more marbled and fatty. And so that whole section was always cut off and fed to the animals. And over time, it was considered unfit for humans, especially people of their stature, to eat the butt end of this particular cut of meat. And so anyway, she prepared the meal, and his family came, and they sat down to have the meal. And everyone remarked about how good her cooking was and the food was, but waited with anticipation for the best cut of the meat to taste it, because even that part would be even better. And the husband inquired, or the husband-to-be, what did she do with the butt end of the portion? Why would she only serve that portion to the leaner portion to his family, but reserve or preserve or hold back the marbled butt portion of this meat, which in their particular culture was the finest part? And being that he was there and helped her pick out the meats and prepare the things for the dinner and shop for the cuts of meat, etc., he knew that they had picked one that was supposed to be one of the finest available. And so he was a little bit insulted and a little bit confused as to why she held back this particular portion and did not share it with his family. Did he think that they were not worthy of it and saved the best for themselves to have at a later time? for herself at a later time and was not willing to give his family the best. And keep it in mind, when people are introducing their families and cultures and things to one another, insult can come very easily, even mistakenly. So when he stepped aside and asked her, why did you give the lesser portion, the less valuable, the less prominent, or I don't know the word to use for it, not the best portion? Why did she only serve that to his family and not the butt portion of this large piece of meat? And she was incensed. And didn't quite understand what he meant. Now, let's go to the second case scenario. The second case scenario was his family prepared the same type of meat in a dinner for her family, her mother and father and her, to come and meet one another. And when everybody sat down to the table to eat, they saw what portion of the meat they were being served and stood up and asked, was this some kind of intentional insult? And his family didn't understand what they were upset about. They had prepared the finest meal that they could provide, and with the finest pieces and cuts of meat available. And we're not talking about people who did not have means. The spread, the layout, the tables, the decor of these dinners were the finest. And so the grandmother was also there. It wasn't just her and her mother and father, but her grandmother was there also. And so when the mother and the daughter stood up and felt insulted, how dare you serve us meat that's worthy of dogs, and felt that it was insulting to her and her family, and was incensed when his family had actually spent a small fortune buying the finest cuts and the finest meats and preparing the finest meal for her family. So skipping a little bit forward, it came down to the grandmother was there, and she didn't understand what the argument was about. And the mother and daughter stopped and looked at her, not understanding, what do you mean? You have always cut off this section of the meat and fed it to the dogs. And here now they want us to eat what is only fit for the dogs. That's how little they think of us in this union. And the grandmother laughed and said, no. I only had one pan to cook in, and the meat was too large for the pan. So I always cut the end off so that it would fit the pan that I had to prepare the meal in. It had nothing to do with the quality of that particular cut of meat. It had to do with the bigger portion being able to fit into the pan that I had for the larger serving, so I could feed my family. It had nothing to do with the quality of it. So there are two morals to the story. One about how traditions are passed down, and people don't even know where the traditions came from, and don't know if that tradition or ideology is consistent with their thought system, their beliefs, their feelings, even their faith. And then you have how quickly others were willing to misunderstand someone else's intentions and be